بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We ask Allah to grant us beneficial knowledge and to benefit us by what He has taught us and to increase us in knowledge always. He is the all-knowing, all-wise. Ameen. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, we continue with the book by Imam Nawawi, Riyasolihen, written by Sheikh Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. We continue with chapter 110. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he titles this chapter Babu Takthir al-Aidi ala al-Ta'am. Chapter on the Takthir al-Aidi, means for there to be abundant hands when eating food. And so what that's referring to is gathering, right? Eating food in a gathering. And so we mentioned that this is from the Sunan that the Prophet ﷺ had commanded and is also a tradition of the past. But kind of with the Western culture and the globalization of the world, we see that now people generally have meals individually. You don't see it too often, except in more traditional cultures, where you see a large group of people sharing a plate. You still find it in parts of the Muslim world, but in Western societies, you don't find it too often. And also another reason why that's changed is because the schedule of people has changed. Right? You live with your spouse and your children, and everybody has their own schedule. So you rarely have the time to share a meal together. And so because of just the culture of the world today, the living style, the work schedule, school schedules, you rarely find the opportunity to share a meal with the entire family. And it isn't haram to eat food individually. It isn't prohibited. It isn't makruh. But from the sunnah is to try to eat food with a group. And we mentioned that this is extremely beneficial for a family. It helps build the family connection, helps teach the children respect and adab. It helps strengthen the connection even between spouses to share a meal together. Because of their busy work style, you sometimes you miss that quality time with your own spouse. And so from the sunnah is that a person tries to share their meal with their spouses and their family and even friends. Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Khalil alayhi salam, it is said that he never ate a meal by himself. He was a very generous Nabi, and he used to always host guests. He would invite the Salihin, the righteous people. He would invite the fuqara, the masakeen. He would always host people at his home, to the extent that it said that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he never ate a meal by himself. And so this is from the sunnah, and this is something we want to revive, even if we do it once a week, a couple times a week. One of the blessings of Ramadan, right, one of the things that we celebrate in Ramadan is that we get to eat with our families every night, right? Or you get to eat with the community every night. And you feel the barakah of eating with your family, of connecting all of you, the entire family together every night and sharing a meal together every night. Because fasting, it forces us to all eat at the same time, right? So everybody's going to make the time to eat, right? So alhamdulillah, with Ramadan we get that. But we also want to try to practice the sunnah throughout the year, even if it's just occasional, even if it's only on a Jum'ah or on a weekend where you share a plate. And from the sunnah is to not just eat together, but to eat together from one dish. So first thing is to eat together. And that's doing a sunnah. If you want to even do more of the sunnah, is to not just eat together, but to get one of those big dishes, right? One of those larger dishes, and everybody. That's why it says takthir al-aidi. Takthir al-aidi means for there to be abundant hands eating from one plate. So that's even a greater sunnah. So gathering is one, and then now increasing, making the food set on one plate, one of those larger dishes, and now the whole family eating from that dish. And so that is also from the sunnah. Again, it's not haram to eat by yourself. It's not haram, there's nothing makruh or haram about it. But the sunnah, we want to practice this, and there are a lot of spiritual, it increases the barakah of the food, it connects the family members, it connects spouses. So this is something we want to revive, inshallah ta'ala, in our homes as much as possible, bi'idhnillah. You have a question?
Yeah, if you have gatherings and you have like friends and family coming over, so you should have like 2 plate dishes, one for the male and one for the female, so they don't mix.
Yeah, so like I've seen, generally if there are large gatherings, they would make large dishes and there would be like 5 or 6 people to a dish, right? So you see that in a lot of, I remember just when I was a teen, maybe like 20 years ago, I used to go to walimas. A lot of the walimas, nikah, feasts that I used to go to, you would see that a lot of Muslims still practice that. They would have a large dish, and then there would be 5 or 6 people, or 4 or 5 people sharing that dish, right? So that was very common. Recently, I don't see that anymore. Now everybody has a to-go box. Here's your to-go box, bismillah, right? So you don't really see that anymore. But if you do have a large gathering, then, there are places in the world where they have a dish for 10 people, 20 people, right? So, the more the better, because that's the sunnah. But even if it's just 2 people, if it's just a person and their spouse, right, a person and their child, it's sunnah. You and a brother eating food together at a restaurant. Get 2 dishes and share each one with each other, right? Instead of being like, this is mine and that's yours. And again, it's not haram, right? If it feels inappropriate or awkward or uncomfortable, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But if we can, we want to encourage this. We want to encourage it at least with our family members, our spouses, our children, our siblings. If we can try to practice this occasionally, once a week, a few times a week, whatever our schedule allows, then we should try to revive this sunnah as much as we can. Wallahu a'lam. So we have 2 ahadith regarding this chapter. The first hadith is narrated by Abi Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم طعام الاثنين كافي الثلاثة وطعام الثلاثة كافي الأربعة. The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said that the food of 2 people is sufficient for 3, and that the food of 3 people is sufficient for 4. What this means is, don't ever restrict people from eating with you because you fear the food is not enough. It's teaching the Muslim generosity. The Prophet is teaching us what? Karam, generosity. So even if you have a certain portion, try to have that mujahada. Right? That mujahada, what? It's okay. This is one person meal, but it's okay, brother. Come sit. If there's 2 people, 3, come eat. Whatever. Even if we each get just 1 portion, the barakah of eating with a group is better than just eating by yourself and not sharing. So the Prophet is encouraging the community, especially because during the time of Sahaba, there was, in the world in general in the past, there wasn't abundant food. And many people couldn't afford the luxuries of different types of food and so on and so forth. And so the Prophet encouraged Sahaba to share. The Muslims were going through hardships. So he would encourage them, don't ever say no to a Muslim because you fear that the portion of the food is not enough for everybody. So he said to the Sahaba, the food of 2 people is enough for 3. Meaning 3, 4, 5. The food of 3 people is enough for 4. Don't let a portion prevent you from having other people share a meal with you. Wallahu a'lam. Yes, Seth, come on.
I think he was saying, like, if you had a large plate and you're mixing with female, what is the permissibility on that?
Eating, is that what you were referring to?
Yeah.
Eating with women?
Yeah.
If there was a large dish and sharing with women?
Yeah.
Generally, the men eat on their own and the women eat on their own, right? Generally. But it isn't haram if women share the dish with men, even if they're not mahram. And that has occurred during the time of Sahaba. There were times where some of the Sahaba came to were guests of another companion. And the wife would join them as they ate, right? But she would be properly covered. And it would be people that they knew very close, intimately, right? So like maybe your cousin, right? Close relatives. Then, you would, even though they're still not your mahram, if you share the dish and people were properly covered, it isn't haram. Is that clear? On condition that there's no fitna. There's no fitna, right? So if it's somebody intimate, maybe a cousin or something of that sort, it isn't your relatives, but they're not your mahram still, right? Because your cousin is not your mahram. But you shared a dish with her, it isn't haram as long as there's no fear of fitna, right? There's no fear of fitna. So it is only allowed in that case. But if there's any type of inappropriateness or awkwardness or something of that sort, then it shouldn't be done. Generally, it shouldn't be done. But if a person was to do it with close relatives, it's fine. Sometimes with sister-in-laws or brother-in-laws, right, you go to the house of your brother and his wife is there and maybe she sits and eats. It's not haram, right? It's not haram, but again, if there's a fear of fitna, then it should be avoided. So this is regarding mixing and the ruling regarding that.
Question about mixing common.
Right.
I think maybe the brother, he meant, subhanAllah, one non-mahram and one non-mahram together by themselves without somebody else, relative, present, maybe singularly by themselves.
So that's another mas'ala, right? If it's, okay, so we have two mas'alas. And I want to clarify the two mas'alas again so that those who are listening online can also be aware of what we're discussing. The first mas'ala is if there's a group of people eating together and there's non-mahram with each other. And so I gave that example. Right? You're at your brother's house, his wife is there, your cousins are there, and maybe you're eating from a dish together or you're eating at a dinner table together. It's allowed as long as there's no worry of fitna. It isn't haram. You just properly cover and khalas, it's permissible. If there's a worry of fitna, then it's not. The other mas'ala is if it's only a man and a woman alone and they're not mahram. Right? And that is haram because of khulwa. Man and a woman who are not mahram cannot be alone together. But if it's with a group, 3 or more, if it's them 2 and one other person, then it's allowed. Then it's allowed as long as there's no fitna. There's no fitna. There's another question regarding khulwa is, and this is a bit sensitive, but I think it's common in our society. If a man and a woman have dinner together in a public restaurant, so they're not mahram for each other, right? But maybe they're considering getting married or something, and they say, okay, you know what? Let's go have a dinner. Is a type of dating, right? It's a type of dating where they have dinner together, and is this permissible or not? I've heard scholars say it's haram, that even though it's in public, the fact that they're still alone together is prohibited. And because of it often leads to other inappropriate relationships is prohibited. So that is what I've heard. The argument could be made for it to be permissible if it was all in public with proper etiquettes and so on. An argument could be made, but the majority of the mashayikh that I've heard and studied from, they said even in those cases it's prohibited. So we can consult, do further research to see the hukum on that mas'ala. If it's in a public space with people around, you're at a public restaurant, there's people eating around you, is it haram in that case? Is it still considered khulwa or not? That's something that can be debated, but what I've learned from my teachers is that it's still haram because of the intimacy of socializing with another non-mahram. Right, and having that kind of intimate conversation, and even if it's in a public space, it's still haram. So that is kind of what I've received and been from my scholars, but that can be searched further. Wallahu a'lam. So those are some masail fiqhiyya. Again, also the first hadith we said, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the food of 2 people is enough for 3. طعام الاثنين كافي الثلاثة. It doesn't mean if the portion is for 2, then it's only enough for 3 and no more. It's encouraging you just to share. That's the purpose. Somebody might say, Sheikh, the hadith says 2 is enough for 3. Number 4, brother, good luck, go find your own food. No, that's not the purpose. Right? So we don't want to be, you have to have fiqh, right? The deen requires fiqh, it requires deep understanding. What is the Prophet ﷺ encouraging us? Is he telling us to be very strict about the number of people, or is that the intent? No. The intent is to share the food. And even if the food is not enough, customarily for 3 people, 4 people, or 2 people, or 3 or 4, still share. Because you want to be generous. The Muslim should be what? Generous. The Muslim is supposed to, higher than that, the Muslim is supposed to favor his brother and sister over himself, right? Or over herself, right? So if there's food, you should share with your brothers and sisters. Encourage them. Especially when I know it's harder when you're hungry and you're just like, I don't want to share, I don't have to bother. But inshallah, we want to make that mujahada to try to be generous and to try to teach ourselves some patience, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The following hadith is narrated by Jabir وعن جابر رضي الله تعالى عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Jabir narrates that he heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say طعام الواحد يكفي الاثنين وطعام الاثنين يكفي الأربعة وطعام الأربعة يكفي الثمانية ورواه مسلم وقد سبق ذكره. Here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he gives another example of this, this number. And again, the number isn't the intent, it's the generosity, the karam. The Prophet ﷺ said, طعام الواحد يكفي الاثنين. The food of one is enough for two. وطعام الاثنين يكفي الأربعة. And the food of two is enough for four. وطعام الأربعة يكفي الثمانية. And the food of four is enough for eight. The next chapter, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he titles it باب آداب الشرب واستحباب التنفس ثلاثا خارج الإناء وكراهية التنفس في الإناء واستحباب إدارة الإناء على الأيمن فالأيمن بعد المبتدئ. So here the Prophet ﷺ, the Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he talks about the sunnah of drinking. What does he mention? He mentions a few ahkam. Number one, he said, the adab of shurb is that one was istihbab التنفس ثلاثا خارج الإناء. That when you drink, you breathe, if you need to breathe, you breathe away from the container 3 times. You take a drink, a sip, or a drink, and then if you need to catch your breath, you don't breathe into the container. Kids do that often, right? They get tired, and then they breathe in, and then they drink again, right? But usually adults know kind of what to do that intuitively. And so we want to teach ourselves, if we're not doing it, and also teach our children. Also, the sunnah is to do it 3. So take a drink, breathe, take a drink, breathe, take a drink, breathe. If you need to do more, do more. If you need to do more, do more. The purpose is what? So you don't choke on water. You're trying to gulp this large amount of water one time, and then you start coughing and you choke on it because you're drinking too much too fast, right? And if the water is also a small amount, it's okay to drink it in one drink or one sip, right? Because it's a small amount. It's half a cup of water. Bismillah, you drink it one time. What are you going to take? Small sip, Bismillah, breathe, small sip. The hadith isn't supposed to be literal, right? You have to have fiqh when you understand the sunnah. Today we have a lot of people who don't understand the sunnah. They're like, sunnah is you drink 3 breaths when you drink, even if it's a small amount. So I'm going to take 3 breaths, even little sips. That's not necessary. That's not necessary. You have to have fiqh when you apply the sunnah. So the sunnah here is what? When you drink a significant portion of water, you don't try to gulp it all one time. Give yourself ease, breathe, so that you're able, inshallah ta'ala, to breathe and drink the water without choking on it. So that's the purpose of the sunnah, or the hikmah of it. The second is وَكَرَاهِيَةُ التَّنَفُّسِ فِي الْإِنَاءِ. He said it is makruh to breathe into the container. And so if you have a container that you're drinking from, it is makruh to breathe into the container. I said kids often do that. Adults intuitively know not to breathe into the container. But inshallah ta'ala, we should know that it is makruh. You never breathe into the container. وَاسْتِحْبَابِ إِدَارَةِ الْإِنَاءِ عَلَى الْأَيْمَنِ فَالْأَيْمَنِ. And he says that it's from the sunnah to also rotate the container, the vessel that we're drinking from, on the right. Traditionally, during the time of the Sahaba and earlier civilizations, cups weren't common, right? You would go to a dish, even many places you still find around the world, there aren't a bunch of cups. Us, alhamdulillah, we have a luxury, we have a variety of cups, and you have your teacup, your just glass cup, this, that, right? You have a certain set of cups for every occasion. You have your to-go cups, right? Your paper cups, whatever, foam cups, and you just toss it and get another one and toss it and and then you have your water bottles. Alhamdulillah, we have a luxury that human society, much of human society didn't have in the past. From the sunnah, the Sahaba, how did they eat? There would be 1 cup at the dish. There would be 1 dish. Remember the Prophet, we said in the sunnah, he had a bowl. I forgot the name of the bowl. He had a bowl that used to be carried by 3 or 4 people. Big dish. They would place it, the food would be, and everybody would eat. Right? That's the way Sahaba ate, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And when they would drink, there would be 1 cup. And then that 1 cup, the person who drinks first drinks, and then he passes the cup to the next person. The next person drinks, he passes the cup to the next person. So from the sunnah is when there is only 1 container, and everybody's drinking from the same container, then you pass it around on the right. You pass it around on the right. That's from the sunnah. And so that's what the hadith is telling us, that if there's one vessel, everybody's drinking from that vessel, pass it around on the right after the first person drinks, and keep it going around the right. And so that's what it's recommended here. It could also be possible, maybe if there's a certain drink and everybody's pouring themselves some, the first person to pour should pour, and then who do they pass it to next? The person on the right. So it could also be applied in that context. Wallahu alam. You had a question?
Yeah, just to comment. In Hajj, they do that practice. They take the one cup
And they rotate it, right?
all the way
Yeah,
around.
so it's fine. And it's not haram to everybody have their own cup. I mean, it's a luxury. It's permissible.
Yeah.
But if it's not there, then it's fine. You know, it's fine.
He's talking about the Zamzam water when they give it to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They just give it away.
and they pass it around.
They don't do that anymore.
They
In
don't.
Hajj, the brother mentioned that there would be one cup that would be rotated, but I went a few years back and I didn't see it.
I was there 2019. They still do that in the Maghrib when Ramadan time.
Or maybe in certain occasions, but now I know, especially with the pandemic, they try to avoid that for health reasons, and so it's fine, for health and sanity reasons to avoid that. But if there's no concern or no fear of that, then it's permissible and completely fine. But we're not saying that it's sunnah. It's permissible, but we're not saying it's sunnah. For food, it's sunnah.
Yeah.
Food is sunnah that you eat from one dish. But for drinking from a vessel, I don't know of anything that says that you should drink from one vessel. No, if there's many vessels, it's fine. Everybody can have their own cup or vessel to drink from. Wallahu alam. All right, let's continue. The hadith in this chapter, the first one has been narrated by Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يتنفس في الشراب ثلاثا. متفق عليه. Sayyidina Anas narrates that, and that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he used to breathe 3 times while drinking. He would drink, take a breath, drink, take a breath, drink, and take a breath. And then he would say, يعني خارج الإناء. He would breathe away from the cup. He wouldn't breathe into the cup. It's also narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تشربوا واحدا كشرب البعير ولكن اشربوا مثنى وثلاث. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not drink one time, right? Do not drink in one gulp like a camel, but in 2 or 3 sips. Right, so you should take 2 or 3 sips. And the Prophet ﷺ said, do not drink like a camel. And the Prophet ﷺ, on more than one occasion, he forbade us to act like animals. In sujood, he told us, do not sit like the sitting of a dog, where you put your elbows on the floor and make sujood. Here he says, do not drink like that of a camel. In other, do not peck the floor like a chicken when you pray your salah, or something of that sort. So there are many hadiths that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us to act with animal-like behavior, to show the kalam of the human being. So here, do not drink like a camel. Drink with proper etiquette, is that you drink with 2 or 3 breaths away from the container. And again, the number of breaths you take is determined by the size of the container. Right? So you might just take no breath because it's a small amount. You might take 2 breaths because maybe that's what's appropriate. You might be extremely thirsty and drink the whole thing one time, and that feels appropriate. Right? It isn't haram, right? So it's according to what you need, but don't exaggerate to try to drink a large portion one time and force yourself. Is that clear? So when you're exhausted, you might drink a larger portion than usual without taking a breath. And then you take a breath, and then you drink again, and then you take a breath the second time, but the second portion isn't as much as the first, because you've quenched your thirst already, so this is additional. And then you drink a 3rd time, right? The hadith requires fiqh, right? The sunnah isn't just these kind of strict ways of code of conduct. You have to do it this way. No, there's wisdom, there's understanding, delicacy to it. So you have to make sure you understand the fiqh behind it. And then he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, وَسَمُّوا إِذَا أَنْتُمْ شَرِبْتُمْ وَاحْمَدُوا اللَّهَ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ رَفَعْتُمْ. وَسَمُّوا إِنْ أَنْتُمْ شَرِبْتُمْ وَاحْمَدُوا إِذَا أَنْتُمْ رَفَعْتُمْ. So he says, alayhi salatu wassalam, and say Bismillah, Samu means to say Bismillah, say the name of Allah when you drink, and praise Allah, wahmadu, praise Allah, after إِذَا أَنْتُمْ رَفَعْتُمْ, when you finish your meal and you leave. And so we know that from the sunnah which we've talked about. This is narrated by Tirmidhi, and he said there's a hadith on Hasan. The following hadith is narrated by Abi Qatadah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يتنفس في الإناء. He narrates that the Messenger of Allah, that the Prophet ﷺ forbade that a person breathe into a container. That a person does not breathe into a container. Why shouldn't they breathe into a container? Because it's disturbing to the person that drinks after you. It's disturbing to the person that drinks after you. So if you're sharing the container, it's even more disliked. If it's by yourself, you still shouldn't do it, but the emphasis of it being disliked is not as severe. Because you're drinking from your own vessel, right? It's just by yourself. But you still shouldn't do it because it's bad etiquette. You're still bad etiquette. But if you're eating or sharing the vessel with another person, then at that point it's very disliked because you're disturbing whoever is sharing that vessel with you. The following hadith is narrated by Anas, وعن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتي بلبن قد شيب بماء. He said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم was brought milk in which water was mixed with. Somebody would think, why would you mix milk with water? There's two reasons why a person would mix milk with water. One is to increase the amount of milk. Milk was wasn't a common luxury like we have today, right? Today we have abundant food, abundance of everything, right? Milk was a luxury that you had to afford. You have to have, either livestock to get it, and not everybody had livestock, or you had to have the money to pay for it. So not everybody had that luxury. So oftentimes, what would they do? They would take the milk, add water to it to increase its amount, so that they can serve it to everybody present in their home. Right? Let's say you have 5-10 guests over at your house, but you only have a certain specific amount of milk portion. What do? You add some water, and then you give everybody a larger quantity that's sufficient for all your guests. So this was a common practice that the Arab did. Another reason they would add water is if you got fresh milk, it would be warm, right? It would come out warm. So you don't want warm milk, and so you want to drink it maybe a little cooler, especially if it's in a hot day or something. So they will add water to cool the milk so that they can drink it, colder. So that was another reason why they would mix milk with water. So the Prophet ﷺ was brought milk that had been mixed with some water. And so وَعَنْ يَمِينِهِ أَعْرَابِي. And so on his right was a Bedouin man. وَعَنْ يَسَارِهِ أَبُو بَكْرٍ رضي الله عنه. And on his left was Abu Bakr. فَشَرِبَ. The Prophet ﷺ drank. ثُمَّ أَعْطَى الْأَعْرَابِي. And then he gave it to the Bedouin man. Now, why is Anas narrating this? Right? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is a senior Sahaba. And he is the companion of the Prophet ﷺ. And he is much older in age. He's 60. He's just 2 years under the Prophet ﷺ. He's the Prophet ﷺ's closest companion. So it would be expected that after the Prophet ﷺ drank, he would give it to the eldest, most recognized and respected person in the gathering. The Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. He gave it to the Bedouin. So it was a bit awkward. Abu Bakr is here, and you give it to a stranger. Not to minimize his status, but you have to give everybody, you deal with everybody according to their level. You give them the appropriate treatment. And so the most appropriate thing expected would be you give it to Abu Bakr. He's senior in age, and that's the etiquette, right? You give it to your elders, you put them ahead, you respect them, you make sure you serve their needs before your needs, and so on. So even from etiquette, you're supposed to do that. But the right, the Bedouin has right because he's on the right. That's the sunnah. He said, that's the haqq. The adab would be to say, no, Abu Bakr, you go first. Right? So let's say somebody's on my right, he's like, Abdullah, here, tafaddal, you can have this, drink. You're the first person on my right. And my father is present. Right? What would be the adab for me to do? To be like, Bismillah, I'm on the right, this is the sunnah, this is my haqq? No, I give it to my father first. I say, Abi, tafaddal, you drink and I'll drink after, inshallah. So that's the adab. Right? So the adab and the haqq are different. Right? Knowing the delicate mannerisms of that situation is different than saying, well, this is just my right. Again, right? That's why you have to have fiqh. You have to have understanding of how to apply the sunnah. The sunnah isn't just, again, people make the sunnah oftentimes appear like it's just this very strict black and white, kind of practice. Right? So you have to have this understanding. So the Arabi, the Prophet gave it to the Arabi. And then he said, al-aymana fal-ayman. He said the right and then the right. Right? So the Prophet said that so Abu Bakr and the rest of the gathering know the reason he gave it to the Bedouin is because the Bedouin has the right. And then the Bedouin has the choice if he wants to let Abu Bakr go first. He could say, Abu Bakr, you take my portion, I'll wait. Right, he has the choice. But the Prophet ﷺ did what was he supposed to do? Give it to the person on the right. Wallahu a'lam. And then we have one more hadith in this chapter, and it's a similar story. Now it's with a younger Sahabi. This one was a Bedouin. Now it's with a young, youth. It's narrated by Sahal ibn Sa'd radiallahu ta'ala anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتي بشراب فشرب منه وعن يمينه غلام. He said that, Sahal ibn Sa'd, that the Prophet ﷺ was brought a drink. And on his right was a young boy. Who was that young boy? Abdullah ibn Abbas. On his right was Abdullah ibn Abbas. وعن يساره أشياء. And on his left were elder men. أشياخ, the shuyukh, elder men. فقال للغلام, he told the young boy, أتأذن لي أن أعطي هؤلاء? Do you give me permission to give these elders before you? He asked the young boy. You see what we said about adab? The haqq is for the young boy. Abdullah ibn Abbas, even though he's just a child, that's his haqq. He's on the right. Yeah. The Prophet said, do you give permission for me to give to the elders before you that are not on my right? And then he said, فَقَالَ الْغُلَامِ لَا وَاللَّهِ. He said, no, by Allah. He said, I'm not favoring the elders. Now there's a wisdom though. He's not being inconsiderate of the elders. There's a wisdom. He said, لا أُوثِرُ بِنَصِيبِي مِنْكَ أَحَدًا. He said, I will not favor anyone over myself regarding the portion I get from you. What does that mean? Right, let's see how they translate it here. He said, I do not give preference to anyone to have my share of you. To have my share of you. Why is he saying that? Because he's going to drink immediately after the Prophet ﷺ. He's going to get the blessings of the Prophet's saliva. The blessings of touching the cups with the lips that the Prophet ﷺ just had touched right now. Right? So he said, this barakah, I'm not going to let anybody else have it. To drink from the same cup. And then you're very intelligent, right? You're going to see where the Prophet ﷺ drink from. You grab it and you drink from the same spot. Ibn Abbas is telling him. He said, I don't want to give that up to anybody. If it was any other person that drank first, it's okay. The elders can have it. But Rasulullah ﷺ drank, and now let somebody else drink after him? No way. I can't give them preference over in this situation. So he kept it because of his fiqh. And this is appropriate. Because there's no favor, you don't prefer others over yourself in ibadah. In ibadah, everybody for themselves. In ibadah, you try to do the much sadaqat, as much zakawat, as much salah. You try to be in the first row. If an elder comes late and you're in the first row, you don't have to leave, you stay. In ibadah, you don't have to prefer others over yourself. You keep it. Respectfully, but you keep it. Okay, same as Abdullah ibn Abbas. He made it clear. He said, I respect my elders. And he told them why. He said, I can't favor you over my share of the Prophet ﷺ. So he told them no because of that. And so they respected him. That's why Abdullah ibn Abbas, he was a sheikh as a boy. He was a scholar and imam as a young boy. Faqih. What kind of child thinks like this, right? Only an intelligent scholar would think like in such a way. That was the intelligence of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. فقال الغلام لا والله لا أوثر بنصيبي منك أحدا فتله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في يده. And then the Prophet he said he placed it. Talla is like he placed it in his hand with like firmness to kind of show he was impressed with him. So the Prophet gave it to Abdullah ibn Abbas with kind of a firmness to show like, that's impressive. The level of your thought, the thinking, and how aware you were, and how you made this decision, and this wise decision, was him. The Prophet showed him, he acknowledged that wisdom of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. He says, تَلَّهُ أَيْ وَضَعَهُ وَهَذَا الْغُلَامُ هُوَ ابن عباس رضي الله عنه. Inshallah, we'll take another short section and then conclude. Here Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, باب كراهة الشرب من فم القربة ونحوها وبيان أنه كراهة تنزيه لا تحريم. He says that chapter on the dislike of drinking directly from a vessel and the like. من فم القربة ونحوها. What does this mean? Here is referring to if there is a vessel or a container that contains a drink, don't drink from the vessel. Don't drink from the carton of milk. That's what it's saying, right? So if there's a vessel that's going to be that people are all going to be pouring something, getting a portion from, or pouring milk from or juice from, don't drink from it. Don't drink from it. That's against the sunnah. And this is not haram, it's makruh. It's a makruh that a person does that. So that's what the sunnah, the hadith, or the hukum is referring to here. The hadith regarding this chapter first is narrated by Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن اختناث الأسقية يعني أن تكسر أفواهها ويشرب منها. Here he is narrated that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم forbade to bend the nozzles of water skins and drink directly from them. Right, so to bend the nozzle from the water skin so that you're able to drink from it. The Prophet forbade it. Why? Because this is shared and it's disrupting, or it's offensive to the other people who are going to pour water or drink from this vessel. So don't drink from it directly. Again, this is intuitive for most people. You usually find youth who are a little bit lazy and they don't want to get up and pour themselves, and they just drink when nobody's looking. But we want to, again, inshallah ta'ala, try to practice the sunnah and also educate our, those under our care. The following hadith is narrated by Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يشرب من في السقاء أو القربة. He said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade that a person drinks from the spout of a water skin or a canteen. And then the following hadith is narrated by Thabit Kabshata bint Thabit Ukht Hassan ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu. Here is narrated by Thabit. Her name is Kabsha bint Thabit. She's the sister of Hassan ibn Thabit. And Hassan ibn Thabit is the famous poet of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so it's narrated, she narrates that قالت دخل علي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فشرب من في قربة معلقة قائمة. She said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم came and entered my home, or entered a place where I was, and he drank from the she said he visited me and drank from a hanging water skin while he was standing. And then she says, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, then I stood up and cut off its spout. So what is this referring to? Kabsha is narrating that the Messenger of Allah visited him. The Prophet used to visit the companions regularly. The young, the old, the children, the women, the elders, the youth. He would visit everybody. It was very routine, very common. He used to visit the children of the Ansar, wipe their heads, check on them, ask them questions, visit the elders, and socialize. He would see the youth, encourage them. If you sit in the streets and pathways, make sure you don't socialize in an area where you're cutting off people's pathway. He would visit the elderly women, have salah with them, make dua for them, and then leave. He would visit his companions, have a meal with them, and then go. This was regular. The Prophet regularly visited the community. This is the advantage of living in a very connected community, right? You have this regular visitation and connection with everybody. Western society, we're very, very disadvantaged, where you're very, very individual. You go to your job, you go to your home, you go to your car, and khalas, your routine. You don't really see people. On the weekends, you go out and you do whatever you do to have fun. There's no really connection with community. You feel very isolated, right? And especially because most of us are immigrants, you don't have extended, family, or you have very limited extended family. So you feel very disconnected, right? And so you see, we're really suffering in the West. And one of the reasons there's an increasing, crime and just mental health issues in our society is that people are alone. People are just alone. People don't have people to connect with. They don't have a family or family members that they're close with. They don't have a community that they belong to, people that they can hang out, socialize with. There's a lot of disconnection. And so from the Sunnah, the Prophet used to visit all the members of the community regularly. There was a strong connection, brotherhood, sisterhood, with everybody, regardless of age and commonalities. He would visit everybody, alayhi salatu wasalam. So here he visited who? Kabsha, the sister of Hassan ibn Thabit radiallahu anha. So she said, the Prophet ﷺ visited me, and he drank from a hanging water skin vessel, right? They used animal skin to make their vessels for water. And so she said he drank while he was standing. To show, first of all, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to command people to sit when they're drinking. But here he demonstrated that it's permissible to drink while standing. See? So the Prophet ﷺ, he would encourage them to do the sunnah, but occasionally he would demonstrate something contrary to the sunnah to show that it's permissible. Does that make sense? He would encourage that a person, they urinate sitting. But he's the Prophet ﷺ, occasionally urinated standing. It happened. To show, listen, it's not haram if you urinate standing, there's no sin. It's permissible. It's sunnah to wash. The Prophet occasionally wiped. Or he commanded, he said, if you wipe, make sure you wipe 3 times. To show that it's permissible. You should wash, but if you wipe, it's fine too, it's not haram. So here he also encouraged people, when you drink sitting. But here he drank standing. It's okay. If there's a circumstance where you don't sit, it's not haram. You don't have to be too strict about it. Don't take it like it's sunnah. Do it if you can. But if you don't, whatever, you don't have the motivation, you're in a rush, laziness, it's okay, it's not haram. We're human beings, it happens. You're not always the most motivated, energetic person. So circumstances change. And so here the Prophet demonstrated that it's okay. You can drink standing. He also drank from the spout of the vessel, from its mouthpiece. And so again, the Prophet, the sunnah is that you shouldn't do that, right? We say you shouldn't drink from the mouthpiece of a vessel, because other people will drink. But here the Prophet demonstrated it was okay. Right? In a situation he knew that the other person wouldn't be offended. Right? In a situation he knew. If you're home by yourself, you're the only person drinking from that juice, maybe nobody else likes it, it's only you know it, you drink. You shouldn't do it. But if you did, it's okay, because you're not really disturbing, upsetting anybody else. If you live by yourself or something of that sort, Allah is not best. Right? You don't have to make a big deal out of it. Although the sunnah is to try to drink and pour into a cup. And then what did she do? She cut off its spout, the mouthpiece, and saved it. Because the Prophet had drank from it. To get the barakah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It says in the commentary, she cut off the spout to preserve a thing that the mouth of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam touched, to have blessings by it. This hadith shows that it is lawful to drink directly from a canteen, while the 2 others show that it is better, however, to not do so. Wallahu a'lam. I think we can go with one more. I'm just looking at the time. Let's see. Okay, we have 2 chapters, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, 4 chapters until we finish this section. So we could add one more chapter and then do the last 3 chapters tomorrow night, and then we'll finish the section on the etiquettes of eating and drinking, or the etiquettes of food. So this final section here, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he titles it, Bab Karahatul Nafkhi fi Sharab, chapter on the disapproval or the dislike of blowing into the drink. So if you're drinking something, it is disliked, it is makruh to blow into the drink. A person might ask about if the food is hot or the drink is hot, can I blow into it to cool it down? It is makruh, not haram, first of all. So if a person, they had a hot cup of tea, they blew into it, it isn't haram. It is makruh. They shouldn't do it, and they should wait for it to cool down on its own, or stir it to cool it down. And so that is the preferred, but if there, whatever reason, they didn't want to wait and they blew into it, khalas, there's no haram in it. It is more makruh if you're sharing that vessel with somebody else. Then at that point, you definitely shouldn't do it. If you're drinking a bowl of soup and it's hot, and maybe it's really hot and you want to cool it down so you're able to drink it, it's better that you wait for it to cool down on its own or stir it. But if you don't and you drink and you blow on it to cool it down, it isn't haram, it's makruh. It should be avoided, but there's no sin if a person does it. How about if a person has a child and the child is what? Hungry, thirsty, and they can't wait. They want to eat, they're starving, and they're crying. Khalas, blow into the food. Because feeding the child is a greater sunnah, it's a greater wajib. How dare you withhold food from a child? Right? So now there's a lack of fiqh. Oh, I'm going to wait for the food to cool down even if the child is crying. That's inappropriate. That's wrong. Blow on the food so it can make it cold for the child and then feed it to the child. right? So there has to be priority. If there's a circumstance in the context where you need to blow onto the food to make it cool, it's okay, because there's a need. But generally, it should be avoided, and the sunnah is to not blow into the food as much as possible, especially if you're sharing that food with somebody else, because now you're gonna, it's inappropriate. It's offensive to the person who's sharing that meal with you that you blow into that food, right? And so that's the reason. If you were maybe your spit or saliva or something, is this something that's offensive? It's disliked by people, and so it shouldn't be done when a meal is being shared with other people. Wallahu a'lam. You had a question about this?
Yeah. That doesn't apply to like fanning the food, right?
No, it doesn't apply to fanning, using, fanning is permissible, completely fine. This is talking about directly blowing into the food. The following hadith, the hadith of this chapter is just two hadiths, very short, so we'll wrap up. The first hadith is narrated by Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن النفخ في الشراب فقال رجل القذاة أراها في الإناء فقال أهرقها قال إني لا أروى من نفس واحد قال فأبني القدح إذن عن فيك فأبني القدح إذن عن فيك. The Arabic is actually فقال الرجل القذاة أراها في الإناء أو القذاة أراها في الإناء فقال أهرقها قال إني لا أروى من نفس واحد قال فأبني القدح إذن عن فيك. ورواه الترمذي وقال حديث حسن صحيح. The translation of the hadith narrates the Arabic language here is a bit I didn't get a chance to read the text ahead of time, but let's see the translation. It's narrated by Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who reported that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam had prohibited blowing into the drink. A man said, sometimes I see specks in the utensil. Al-qadata araha fil ina. So he said, I see some specks in the utensil. He said, pour them out. If you see specks in your vessel, pour it out. And then the man asked, I do not feel sated with one sip. The man said that if I just take one sip, it doesn't satisfy me. And then he said, then remove the cup from your mouth to breathe. The Prophet encouraged him that to feel, to quench your thirst, drink water in portions. Drink water in portions. And subhanAllah, this is actually established that when you drink water, to stay hydrated, you shouldn't drink a large amount of water one time. It doesn't actually hydrate you the same way drinking small portions over a period of time does. Right? That's why when you drink a large portion in a short time, you urinate very frequently. Your body has a hard time, your bladder or your kidney has a hard time processing that much water, or your body has a hard time processing that much water. So to be hydrated, you're actually supposed to drink small portions of water throughout the day, or throughout time. The final hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يتنفس في الإناء أو ينفخ فيه. Ibn Abbas said that the Prophet ﷺ forbade that a person breathe in a container or they blow in it. So to breathe into it or to blow in it. And that is the end of this section. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow night with chapter 114 and hopefully conclude this section of the book. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, you say it in the group, right?
Yes.
I know sunnah to wash hand.
Yes.
I see people, they don't wash hand and, can we tell them, hey, go wash hand and before we eat?
Yeah, I mean, the brother was asking, to eat in a group is of course from the sunnah, but sometimes people might eat without washing their hands. And so, you can give them a spoon if you want to avoid the situation. Or you can just, gently suggest it to them, inshallah, let's wash our hands. Go first, you demonstrate. Sometimes that's the best way to get somebody to do something. Just make it a little awkward for them and they'll do it. So Bismillah, let's go, let me wash my hands real quick, right? You don't even have to say anything. You'll see the next person getting up washing their hands, right? So in a subtle way, without offending a person, you can give them, tell them to wash their hands, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam. Jazakumullah khair. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us by this lesson and to accept from us our ibadat and to forgive our sins. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.